Right. Are we good at the back? Great. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for staying with us in the Food Systems Pavilion. If you've been with us for the last 4 or 5 sessions, welcome to this one. As you can see on the screen, it's Money Talks. What's holding us back? What's holding us back? And we're looking forward to a great discussion. We got some fabulous panelists with us. We're hoping the technology is going to work. We have some very kindly simultaneous translation going on. So it's great to be with you all. Look, we all know smallholder farmers and pastoralists bear the brunt of climate change impacts. And we know as well that they're being increasingly pressured to adapt, to come up with more sustainable practices that ensure greater sustainability. But at the same time, frankly, I still, in my privileged way as the CEO of SNV, my name is Simon O'Connell, by the way, wherever I get to go to, I still hear challenges around smallholder farmers, lack of access to financing, lack of access to the right tranches or the right forms of financing, and I hear more of that in those protracted crisis or fragile environments. So we know there's a long way to go. There are, of course, some very impressive initiatives, some of which have been announced over the last few days here at COP. So finance and access to finance is growing, and we're going to hear some of the successful models that exist, but we know that there are still a long way to go. Just as one example, I have a statistic here on my phone, 34% of the average 29.5 billion in climate finance for Africa went towards adaptation. So still very, very significant shortfalls on that front. And just 3%, ladies and gentlemen, of those funds came from the private sector. So we must do more to start mobilizing more of that private sector financing. We're going to have some expert speakers to help us understand some of the important initiatives that are taking place. And then we're going to have a panel conversation to really explore what more can be done. So with that, first up, I'm really delighted to see you again, Patty Fong. Patty is the director at the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. And Patty, you're going to say some key words for the next few minutes to kick us off. Welcome, Patty, and there's a microphone on the panel for you.
Thank you, Simon. Pleasure to be here. So 5 days ago, the COP28 presidency announced a leaders' declaration on sustainable agriculture, resilient food systems, and climate action. And for the first time, heads of states from 134 countries, actually I heard it's now over 140 countries, acknowledged the impact of climate change on our food systems. And as a part of that declaration, countries committed to including food and agriculture in their next revisions of the NDCs, which I've been told is due in 14 months, just over a year from now. So countries need to be, if they're not already, need to be preparing their next NDCs. This is a long overdue step. Food systems contribute to 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, not only in the form of methane and nitrous oxides, but also energy use in its worst form, that is fossil fuels. In fact, food systems, especially industrialized food systems, account for at least 15% of fossil fuels that are burned annually. So it remains to be seen whether this declaration will catalyze countries to be ambitious in how they address their food systems, both for adaptation and for mitigation. Our climate finance report from last year, which researched all the NDCs which were submitted in the last round, revealed that just over 70% of the NDCs lacked any detail on how they're going to address food and agriculture. We also found that food systems receive just 3% of climate finance. And a new study from this year found that smallholder farmers receive just 0.3% of finance, even though smallholder and family farmers feed about 70% of the world. So the money is there. What's the problem? One, countries, as revealed in the NDC analysis, they're not prioritizing food systems. They don't have enough specific action on the measures, the plans, the costs, sources of finance that are needed. So without these specifics, you can't tap into the climate finance potential. In the last round of NDCs, there is estimated needs, or the funding needs estimated for energy and transport were nearly 5 times more as for food systems, for food and agriculture. But in reality, it shouldn't be about competing for funds, whether it's for energy and transport or for food. In fact, the food value chain cuts across all sectors. And decarbonizing food systems holistically will require addressing emissions in energy and transport, as well as from livestock and agriculture through agroecology and regenerative practices, as well as ensuring renewable energy access for cold storage, for drying, for processing, for transport, and for cooking. Secondly, the outcomes in the NDCs aren't clearly specified to include any type of targets or indicators how they're going to measure the climate investments that they received. We need to have these in order to really attract the investments and show that there are benefits not only for adaptation and mitigation, but also for health, for livelihoods and incomes and other environmental benefits. Third, national food and agriculture policies are not aligned with climate goals. Governments spend 57 times more on potentially harmful agricultural subsidies than they do on public climate finance going into food systems. Next, there's a lack of coordination across ministries and government departments, as well as between national, regional, and local levels. We need to improve this coordination in order to minimize the trade-offs and risks and maximize all the benefits that on climate, on health, on resilience, and on livelihoods. And finally, and most importantly, we need inclusive decision-making. Why isn't the funding getting to those on the ground? Well, if you're not part of the identifying the challenges and solutions and part of the decision-making process, you're not going to be able to input into the structure that is needed to get finance to those who are most impacted. The ones on the front lines, working on landscape level, working in farming communities or fisher communities, they hold the knowledge about the challenges and the opportunities and need to be part of the process. It needs to be a co-decision making process on not only the solutions, but also on the financing mechanisms. So I look forward to hearing from the panelists and hearing about all the successful solutions that are out there and how we can scale it up. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you so much, Patty. So what I hear there, Patty, is we're in the Food Systems Pavilion. We're making progress on joining some of those dots, on breaking down some of the silos, but we've still got quite some way to go in moving even further. So what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is hear the demands from 3 of our speakers. So first up, I'd like to warmly welcome Elizabeth Nsimadala, who's the president at Eastern Africa Farmers Federation. So Elizabeth, tell us, what are your demands?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this discussion, to bring in voices from the smallholder farmers. And I would like to pick it from Patty. I hope I mentioned your name correctly. Especially where she mentioned that the money is there, but where is the problem? And I think for me, the biggest challenge is the cost of finance. Because the cost of finance currently in most of the commercial banks is over 18%, which really doesn't make an economic sense when it comes to smallholder farmers. So we'd really want to see a financing model where we have a 1-digit interest rate for smallholder farmers. And then the other issue is on the risky agriculture as an enterprise. Because most of the financial institutions are looking at agriculture as a risky venture. When you look at the total financing portfolio in most of the commercial banks, it's less than 5% to the agriculture sector. And when it comes to smallholder farmers, it becomes worse. And out of this portfolio, the less than 5% portfolio, also majority of it goes to the post-harvest. There's little that is really invested in the production bit. And also one reason is because we've not invested into value chain development from farm to fork. So most of the value chain actors are concentrated at the post-production. The other challenge that I see is on support for adaptation, especially for us smallholder farmers, because we are greatly impacted by climate change, but we have limited access to climate financing. She really put it correctly that 0.3% is the amount that farmers are able, smallholder farmers are able to access when it comes to climate financing. So would want to see increased and inclusive access of climate financing by smallholder farmers. But also when you look at the institutions that are managing climate funds, majority of them commercial banks, and there's a lot of bureaucracy in those institutions to be able to access such kind of funding. But also the other aspect is on the accredited entities. We see, if any, very few institutions that are non-financial institutions that are accredited entities to receive financing. So we would love to see more farmers organizations as accredited entities to be able to access climate financing. And lastly, there is nothing for us without us. And if we are not invited on the table, then we might be the menu. Okay, so we are saying as smallholder farmers, we need to be part and parcel of the discussions. We need to be included in all the policies, consultations, and also the implementation, the decisions that are being made in resource allocation and so forth. And we are ready for partnerships. We are ready to engage as eco-partners because we believe we are the largest private sector collectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of tweets there for all of you. If we're not invited at the table, we're the menu. And a single-digit interest rate. I don't know if there's anyone from the financial institutions in the room who might like to pick up on that excellent point a bit later. Elizabeth, thank you. So next up, Mumuni Compaore, who's the Country Advocacy Officer at Oxfam Burkina Faso. Vous êtes chaleureusement bienvenue.
Ok, donc bonsoir. Je suis plus confortable en français, donc je vais le faire. J'espère que la traduction nous permettra de... Voilà. Donc très rapidement, je vais vous donner un petit aperçu sur les financements climatiques en Afrique de l'Ouest. Disons qu'en 2022, Oxfam a publié un rapport sur les financements climatiques en Afrique de l'Ouest dans 8 pays de la région ouest africaine, y compris le Sahel. Et qu'est-ce qu'on peut retenir?
So I will speak French because I feel more comfortable speaking French. So I will give you an overview of the funding. In 2022, there was a report from Oxfam which was published. It's a report which concerns the funding in 8 different countries of West Africa.
Donc, ces 8 pays sont le Burkina Faso, le Tchad, le Ghana, le Mali, la Mauritanie, le Niger, le Nigeria et le Sénégal. Et il faut retenir que entre 2013, puisque l'étude concerne la période 2013 à 2019, et entre cette période-là, il faut dire que le montant du financement climatique international reçu par ces pays tourne autour de 11,7 milliards de dollars, soit une moyenne d'environ 1,7 milliard de dollars par an, par pays. Et lorsqu'on fait un agrégat de toutes ces ressources reçues par la région, il se trouve que chaque habitant, chaque personne de la région reçoit environ 4,9 dollars par an. au titre du financement climatique, ce qui est énormément inférieur aux besoins qui est estimé aujourd'hui, qui est estimé plus ou moins à 57,75 dollars par personne par an. Donc l'écart déjà d'un point de vue individuel est déjà énorme.
So the report concerns the funding in 8 different countries, and the 8 different countries are Burkina Faso, Chad, Ghana, Mali, Mauritania, Nigeria, and Senegal. And so we can read in this report that the climate fund, the finance, represent only 7% of the needs of these 8 countries. And between the period from 2013 to 2019, all these 8 countries received only $11.7 billion, which is an average of $1.7 billion per year. But if we analyze the situation in the region, we can make a calculation, and so we can see that the region of West Africa and Sahel receives only $4.9 per year. And so this means that the needs of the people are not met, because according to the NDC, the need will be the $57.75 per year per person. So there is a big gap.
Aussi, il faut noter que les financements climatiques déclarés sont largement en deçà des besoins. Déjà, il faut dire que sur la base des CDN des 8 pays, il faut noter que le besoin moyen s'élève à 19 milliards environ par an. Alors que les niveaux de financement climatique déclarés en 2019 tournent autour de 2,5 milliards. Vous voyez, alors que le besoin exprimé par an, c'est 19 milliards. Donc le gap est également important. Et ce qui aggrave encore la chose, c'est que lorsqu'on essaie d'appliquer l'indice d'Oxfam sur l'assistance nette spécifique au climat, qui permet d'atténuer, qui permet plus ou moins de corriger les biais et d'avoir le financement réel de ces pays, on se retrouve autour de 7,3% en termes de besoins satisfaits.
So if we make a comparison between the climate fund, climate finance, and the needs of West Africa and Sahel, so based on the NDCs of this country, the funding should be equal to $19.7 billion per year. But if we analyze the situation, we see that only $2.5 billion have been allocated to this country. And so there is a huge gap. And if we consider the estimate from the ANSC of the Oxfam, the real value of the funding of the climate finance is only 7.3%. So it's a number which is even lower than what they actually say.
Il faut noter qu'au niveau du financement de l'adaptation, il faut dire qu'on a plus ou moins 50% des financements reçus par la région contribuent au niveau de l'adaptation, et nous avons 39 au niveau de l'atténuation. Si on veut le comparer par rapport aux exigences de l'accord de Paris, on peut dire qu'il y a cet équilibre. Par contre, lorsqu'on veut prendre en compte les besoins réels de la région, on va se dire qu'il y a toujours une certaine insuffisance, bien que l'équilibre entre l'adaptation et l'atténuation semble être satisfait.
So if we consider all the funding, especially for the adaptation funding, we can say that it is not enough. It is not sufficient. Only 50% of the climate finance given to West Africa contributes to adaptation objectives. 39% is allocated to the mitigation measures, and 11% only to a mix of adaptation and mitigation measures. So this can be in balance with the Paris Agreement, but if we consider the needs, the real needs of the population, there is no balance at all.
Thank you so much. If I can just ask you now, just a concluding remark, and then we will turn to our next segment, please.
Ok.
Juste
Donc,
dernier mot.
juste pour conclure, pour aller au message, il faut noter que ce que je n'ai pas pu dire, c'est qu'il y a aussi des instruments de prêt qui sont largement utilisés pour le financement climatique dans cette zone. Autour de 62% du financement reçu est fait sous forme d'instruments. Donc pour nous, comme message déjà, c'est de dire, OK, il faut moins recourir aux instruments de dette, il faut vraiment privilégier les subventions pour le financement de l'adaptation. Ça, c'est un premier message. L'autre message aussi qu'il faut considérer, surtout à l'endroit des institutions de financement, c'est vraiment d'aller, de ne plus aller du haut au sommet. C'est-à-dire de commencer vraiment de privilégier les communautés à la base, en allant vers le sommet, ce qui nous permettra certainement de satisfaire davantage les besoins des communautés, les petits producteurs qui sont au niveau de la base. Et un dernier élément,
I think you have a lot to say. Okay. Vous avez des points très importants, mais juste pour le temps, if you would be kind enough to translate.
Okay, so there are different tools, loans, but they represent 52% only. So we can say as a final message that we need more grants for the adaptation measures, and we need a type of funding which is no more top down, but it's bottom up. So it has to start from the communities. And it didn't finish because there's no more
lots
time.
of really important. Thank you, Momuni. Thank you so much for the last-minute translation. And really to underscore, so it's not just private sector financing, it's not just development finance institutions, it's also grant money is needed to be getting where it is really necessary. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite up Voli Carucci, who's the Director, Resilience and Food Systems Service Program Humanitarian Division, Local Food Supply Chain Alliance at the World Food Program. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Simon. That's, again, real pleasure to be with you today. It's the second event. And actually, this is a good segue from the first one that had the title, Putting Farmers First. And financing seems to be, climate financing seems still to be very, very low for agriculture and for farmers, fishermen, pastoralists in general. UNDP, I think, set like 80 times more needs than what was actually received, like $2.1 per person, as opposed, I mean, from the ask, which was 80 times higher. We have a problem there, and as a World Food Program and as members of the Alliance for more resilient supply chains, we are concerned about the context that we classify as contexts that are extremely fragile, context of fragility, facing the brunt of climate change, almost like a sequel of droughts after droughts, and sometimes twinning with floods because of the situation of the soils, the depletion of biomass, but also because of 30 or 40 years of land degradation, the hidden cancer that is eating up 100 million hectares of landscapes in the continent of Africa alone, 300 million hectares worldwide, are moderately to severely degraded. And this is something that we cannot just continue to accept. But the climate financing doesn't go into those areas that needs climate financing the most. It's a very high-risk area. It's where you need to actually be staying for a very long period of time, work with local institutions, working increasingly with les services déconcentrés de l'État et les partenaires locaux, local partners. I think you have understood. It's just for my brother from Burkina Faso. And I'm taking this opportunity to provide the condolences to his country because of the passing away of Yakuba Sawadogo, one of the biggest champions on soil and water conservation in the planet. I was awarded the Land for Life Award in 2019, for example. So this is just to say that we need more investment in those kind of innovations, in those kind of efforts out there. The good news is that we are beginning to see a growing interest. And one of the plea here is more or less what is building upon what I said this morning, building the evidence of what works, including the scientific evidence to back up visuals, storytellers, research, particularly by engaging local academia in this work. Not the Global North academia, but the Global South academia. To find increasingly local solutions for local problems, but also local opportunities, because those are all landscapes, all areas that can go back to production. We have an amazing scale-up of resilience work in Burkina, in Mali, in Niger, in Chad, in Ethiopia, in Mauritania, that need to be featuring more and more into the documents, into the advocacy work that we can collectively do. And climate financing, from our perspective, it should not be seen only as financing that comes from the Green Climate Fund, the GEF or the Adaptation Fund, but climate financing is also an integral part of social protection financing for increasingly more shock-responsive adaptive social protection financing, nutrition financing. There's not going to be healthy diets without healthy nutrition, without healthy soils, for example. And we need to think how to link the dots between what will be good for climate as well as for people, for diets, for social cohesion, and therefore bring things together. The financing discourse is very segmented, is very polarized. But if $1 can be put into regenerative resilience, that will have benefits in climate adaptation and mitigation. It will have benefits in nutrition, benefits in education, reduction of hardship, so empowerment, free up space for lowering hardships and then more power for women to actually access education or access social services. And then finally, the social cohesion agenda that brings the equity part into it. So all the actions that will be linked to tenure will be linked to a climate. So how we can bring things together? We managed to convince through really thorough documentation of qualitative indicators, quantitative indicators, spatial imagery through an asset monitoring from space mechanism, and research ground proofing on the ground to capture a lot of donors' attention that they never looked at the World Food Programme. And as World Food Programme, we reach out to the UNICEF, to the IFAD, to other partners, to the GIZ, because it's through a coalition. Let's lower our flags. Let's bring things together for a common convergence, action at scale, because scattered, small-scale silos doesn't work.
Thank you, Wally.
Etc.
Thank you.
That's all I want to say.
De-risk, deflag, defragment. 3 Ds.
Excellent.
Right
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Warm applause. Thank you so much, Wally. So what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, just to inject a bit of new energy into the room, we've got 3 one-minute videos as examples of some of the solutions, some of the things that are possible. So again, hoping the technology is going to work for us. I think we have first up Sustainable Fiber Alliance from ILRI. If you're able to play the video, please.
The SFA is a non-profit, standard-holding and membership organisation that represents a global alliance of supply chain actors, stakeholders and industry experts, with a mission to drive positive change in natural fibre value chains. Our vision is for a responsible and inclusive global natural fibres sector that balances and safeguards the health and well-being of people, animals and the environment and rangelands. Our work first started by supporting cashmere herders in Mongolia, working with the end-to-end supply chain. We now work with over 160,000 herders across Mongolia and China, connecting them to traders, processors, spinners, suppliers, manufacturers, and brands and retailers in the global fashion industry, ensuring all adhere to the SFA chain of custody. Focused on the herder level, the SFA Cashmere Standard outlines 5 global principles for responsible cashmere production. These are effective management, decent work, biodiversity and land use, animal welfare, and fibre quality improvement. we are only able to make these positive impacts from funding solely received through the private sector. This 100% private sector funding is invaluable to supporting Indigenous communities and the rangelands. Through this commitment, the SFA are working together with like-minded organisations who are dedicated to improving the rangelands and reversing the effects of desertification as part of the upcoming Rangeland Stewardship Council. As part of the Rangeland Stewardship Council, we will be ensuring the livelihoods of herders and pastoralists globally by diversifying into other value chains alongside fibres, such as dairy, leather and hides, and meat products, building on what we have learnt in the cashmere sector. From this, we will be working with multi-stakeholders to support the world's rangelands through ecological functions, biological diversity, carbon sequestration, forage crop production, recreation, and improving livelihoods. If you would like to learn more about the SFA's work or about the Rangeland Stewardship Council, then please do contact info@sustainablefibre.org for more information. Thank you.
Fantastic. And now we should have Agri3 Fund, which is a partnership with IDH and Rabobank.
Producing enough food to sustain the fast-growing global population is driving a rapid expansion of agricultural production, and with it, deforestation, soil degradation, habitat loss, and rising carbon emissions. Innovating financial mechanisms are required to incentivize a systemic change in how agricultural commodities are produced to meet global climate, biodiversity, and land degradation neutrality targets. To create this transformational shift, the Agri3 Fund, with the support of UN Environment Program, works with financial institutions to design new financial products that enable farms to restore the health of their farmlands and achieve positive environmental and social impacts at scale. Agri3, together with Rabobank, have designed a standardized loan for degraded pasture land renovation in Brazil that combines 4 features to achieve impact at scale. Firstly, the extended 10-year loan matches the long-term nature of pasture renovation. Secondly, as a condition of the loan, farmers must comply with an Environmental and Social Action Plan, ESAP, including maintaining zero deforestation across their farms. Thirdly, Agri3, in partnership with IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, offers technical assistance to farmers to support them to meet their ESAP commitments. Fourthly, Agri3 provides environmental and social impact monitoring support to help farmers with their annual reporting. The collaboration with Rabobank allows the loan to then be rolled out to an extensive network of local farming clients. The Renova Pasto loan demonstrates the commercial feasibility of financing the transition to more sustainable agricultural practices, creates a strong incentive for farmers to restore degraded lands, and supports farmers to transition to sustainable land use practices at scale. Learn more about how Agri3 is working to close the nature finance gap.
Great. And last up, the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, which is in partnership with FMO, WWF, and SNV.
Climate change is one of the biggest challenges we face today. It is already affecting people and nature across the globe, with developing countries being most impacted. There is an urgent need for investment to enable vulnerable communities and ecosystems to adapt to climate change. Yet funding is in short supply. The government of the Netherlands has committed to addressing this need by making 160 million euros available through the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, known as the DFCD. Managed by a pioneering consortium of FMO, Climate Fund Managers, SNV and WWF, the DFCD will work with the private sector to catalyse over 500 million euros in additional funding for bankable projects across the world. These projects will boost the health of fresh water, forest, agricultural, and ocean ecosystems, and improve water management. Critically, the DFCD will help vulnerable communities to adapt, drive sustainable development, and strengthen global efforts to tackle climate change. The fund is ready to build new partnerships. So join us in our mission to create a more resilient future.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So it's now my great pleasure to invite three people up to the panel. First of all, Aaron Vermeulen, who's from the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development from WWF. Warm welcome. Berry Martin, member of the Managing Board of Rabobank, and Dr. Bapon Fakhruddin, who's the Senior Water Specialist at the Green Climate Fund. So very, very warm welcome. Starting with you, if I may, Aaron, give us a sense, please, if you can, of what a bold public-private partnership financing approach could look like, which could really unlock or open up the way for the DFCD or some other initiatives to scale investment through more pipeline.
Thanks for that question, Simon, and good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I'm not with the DFCD anymore. I was seconded now to the WWF International as a green lead, so my colleagues in the Netherlands have taken over, but I'm still very committed to the DFCD, and I was involved in founding it, so I can still speak to it. But yeah, let me start a little bit with a quote of Larry Fink 2 days ago. Larry Fink, the BlackRock guy, the largest asset manager in the world, he made a really important statement, and he said, the financial architecture in the world is not ready to deploy capital to the global south. And he was very honest about that. But he also hinted to the promise of blended finance. So it was one of the first times that you see mainstream investors talking about blended finance. Well, before it was Rabobank, SNV, WWF talking about it. So I think that's really promising. But what is less promising is that the total volume of blended finance has halved over the past 2 years. So it's actually going down, it's not going up. So there are some economic reasons for that. So interest rates, foreign exchange risks have not been very well supportive of blended finance instruments. But I think there are also some underlying issues, pipeline development too slow, risk appetite of banks, risk perception of banks not aligned with the pipeline. I heard the lady say high interest rates as a consequence of that. So, well, you asked me, Simon, what do we need to do in terms of BOLD? I think work on blended finance in a less linear way. So the DFCD and also AgriFi are really nice examples how you work less linearly and really in consortia with private sector, with non-profits and with banks to really crack that nut and solve that riddle. And to a little bit more about DFCD is we said, okay, on one hand, we want to deploy climate finance, but we also notice that there's a lack of adaptation finance and there's a lack of finance to sustainable food production. So what we did is we said, okay, we will build an origination facility which is well-resourced. So 20% of the 160 million goes to identifying bankable agricultural companies and then really looking at the risk that they are facing in order to get access to finance. So really working very closely between private companies, but also getting the investors, FMO is in the room maybe as well, getting them involved very early stage so that we're not very enthusiastically working with the private sector and then get the disappointment after 1 year, right? And then also to make sure that the impact is right, we don't only look at the farm level, but we look at the whole landscape in order to quantify the adaptation contribution.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aaron. And so, Berry, turning to you, and I'm going to put you on the spot a bit as the systems-wide transformation that we really need to see happening. Aaron, you were talking a bit about the need for acceleration, for speed, etc. Berry, what can we do to speed up the release of risk capital to generate that much needed wider systems transformation?
Well, thank you. Well, the reality is that we have not, as a banking, as actually as a global organizations, we actually never actually look at the business as smallholder farmers, as the way food is produced, as a global value chain, and we have just not done it. And what's happening is that also for the banks and everybody, we have been putting the risks at the lowest denominator. We're still doing that. I mean, how much? I mean, the fact is, all the risk is with the smallholder farmers. We have not de-risked actually their activities. We have not created structures to try to find a way to pay for ecological services that are not only the food services, but also for ecological services. So thinking about that, what we have been tried at Rabobank, we actually created a department within our innovation department. That's only thing is what they're looking at is how do you create enabling factors to de-risk and make sure that we can actually reach the money. The money can get to the smallholder farmer, flow through the value chain, and actually de-risk the value chain in this whole thing. That's what we're doing right now. So AgriTree is one example. The other one is Acorn. Some of you have looked at it. What are we trying to do there is pay for the biomass created on farm and try to get 80 cents on the dollar that we can sell the carbons into the financial market. So we have been able to sell farm holders, smallholder farm carbon credits into the London market, getting $35 and being able to get 80 cents on that back into the smallholder farmers using technologies. We have now been looking at, okay, how can we enhance the investments that we are doing in banks, in challenged countries, if I may say so. So how do you do that? Because at the end you need to reach out while we are talking about the Western Uganda. So how do you do that? How do you capacitate those banks so they can reach out in local currency? One of the risks, I mean, why is interest rate so high? Well, you talked about it, foreign exchange. You have to mitigate that risk. You have to take that out. The other thing is, why we are just starting the things from the wrong side. Most of the projects start actually trying to find as a smallholder farmers. Actually, we need actually to look at where is that product going to, and we have to work backwards on the whole value chain. The Farm to Market Alliance, one example, we are trying this very hard because once you know what's going to be bought, you can work backwards. The reality is that I think 95% of the smallholder farmers today produce without knowing what the price or if they can get their product to the market. And if you think about the bank, that's highly risky. So you need to turn it around. If you have already, if you already know how much if you're going to sell the product and know what the price is for what you're going to get, you de-risk the value chain again. So basically what we are trying to do at Rabobank is have this innovation team looking at how do you create an ecosystem that is an enabling system to de-risk. And I know we have talked about insurance, and that's only one part of it. So that's what we're trying to do. And we are putting our money where we should, because as you know, we are putting tens and tens of millions in trying to find solutions. And today we already reach at least, I think, daily 3.5 to 5 million smallholder farmers, depending on the projects how we are doing. But there are 550 million smallholder farmers, so it's only small. But we cannot do it alone as Rabo. And that's why are looking at partnerships. And that's the only way of doing it. And on the question of the interest rate, it is because most banks still look at it as a risky business. And basically, and I will tell you one thing, and maybe it's something that you don't know here, is that actually our regulators, ECB and everybody, actually think that financing farmers is a dirty business. You know that? And I can, in my bank today, I can better finance coal, which is less finance emissions than actually considered as lower finance emissions than financing farms. So it's crazy. We are battling that every day, but has to change. Financing farms is financing nutrition. Finding social, finance ecological, and there should be a netting on there, and so actually it should be 0 and not 100 as it is like now in finance emissions.
Terrific, thank you, Barry. So if I may, I'm going to try and get a bit of a click going between the two of you sitting here in the center, and Aaron, you're welcome to join in if you want. So turning to you, Bapon, I spent a bit of time with some of your senior colleagues over recent weeks. We're hearing some buzz, some momentum. I think one of your colleagues was saying a couple of days ago with the GCF. There is a commitment to access, enabling greater access. There's a commitment to acceleration. There's a commitment to greater simplicity. Wonderful. So good to hear. So why is it that most of the funding of the GCF in Africa is directed towards governments and development banks? And then, and this is the click bit I'm trying to explore, if I may, unscripted, how do we get more of the mechanism to work between the two of you and your two institutions sitting here in the middle? Bapon.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. I mean, as you saw, our strategic plan for the next 4 years, the board actually wants to give more priority to the country itself. So which means actually, if you look at our GCF1, we actually work more with the international accredited entity, UN, as well as many of the MDBs. But then there is a lot of noise from the countries that actually maybe 20 to 25% of the money actually doesn't come to the country itself, because those are actually evaporates up in the sky. So they like to have those money within the country. And then the board actually considered that how we actually create a more enabling environment to support more the direct access entity. And obviously the GCF is a second due diligence organization, so we work with the partners. And one of those mechanisms actually try to look at actually how to promote or how to build the capacity of the national government or national banking system so that they can actually provide those kind of concessional loan. What we are hearing actually, the three fundamental instruments is missing here, which is one is actually risk appetite, another one is ticket size, and the third one is actually looking at the more on the risk versus your ticket versus the different instrument, which is like a flexible financing system, because blended financing could not work unless there is the flexibility there. So as long as you bring the flexibility, it could work. So if you plot this in a three-dimensional diagram, you'll not find actually many of those MDBs or banks are actually located in between the middle. Most of them has a two instrument, either you take a loan, high interest, or fixed interest, fixed term, or a TA. That's what actually the MDBs provide. But that's the point of view. GCF is saying that we are a catalytic financing where you have all sort of instrument. You can use the equity, you can use the highly concessional loan, which is like a 0% up to 30 years you can go if you look at your profitability margin. You can use the equity as well as insurance and all sort of instrument, result-based financing, debt swap, and all sort of things. So that makes the countries actually a little bit easy or flexibility to bring the money to supporting to the local entity. And there are actually a lot of joint venture activities happening, which is like a big private company coming and helping to the local entrepreneur, local partner, especially in the Africa, in the energy sector, you'll be seeing that are more happening. So that's maybe a good sign, but also we need to look at actually how the national private sector could be bring together and how we can actually provide some of the discussion again that actually raised the policy and environment and ecosystem legislation to play them in a safer environment, because unless they see a de-risking instrument, nobody gonna spend their money, neither we ourselves as a personally. So that's the thing we need to look at.
Thank you, Bapon, so much. So Elizabeth, I'm going to invite you to come back up here you've heard these three gentlemen speak. You framed some of the problems, some of the challenges and the opportunities at the beginning. What would you like to, how would you like to respond to them? Would you like to come back up? Come and take a seat up here.
I think they're trying to put in context of the issues that I already raised. I'm happy that institutions like the Rabobank understanding the challenge and coming in to address some of the challenges that the farmers are facing. But also, I think one issue that was raised, that the funding is not enough. Yes, considering the demand and also the available funding, it's not enough. But then how do we make sure that with the little that is available, smallholder farmers are able to have access to adaptation funding? The other thing is on the issue of the accessibility of the funding, especially with institutions like GCF that are working with the government. I don't know what is the procedure for farmers' organization, for example, to have access to your funding. Because the bar is so high that most of the farmers' organization does not meet the criteria to be able to have that access to funding. But also when you look at the ticket sizes, they're also so huge that they are, I mean, way big considered to the demands of the smallholder farmers. So can we have a system, or is there any I would say, I don't know whether I should call it like a private window or another window where smallholder farmers can have relatively smaller ticket sizes that can be accessed? Or are there organizations that can work with the farmers to be able to access that kind of funding? Maybe lastly, do you also have a component on technical assistance when it comes to access to such kind of funding? Because that is also another challenge. We don't know how to access that kind of funding. So how can we be assisted in terms of capacity building of our own farmers organizations and cooperatives to be able to access that kind of funding?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. You pass the mic down first to Aaron, because it's Aaron, you'll remember from your DFCD days, the ticket size question, isn't it? What are we going to do about that? And then we'll go
billion dollar ticket size question. But no, it's not $1 billion, but it's 100,000 or maybe less, right? But I think we already provided some elements to the problem on the ticket size, right? So you're not going to change the way GCF or the development banks or Rabobank are working. I mean, they have their own infrastructure. So what you need to do is maybe pool money together in dedicated funds that can provide different financial instruments, debt, equity, technical assistance grants. So I just had a great lunch with a lady of Acumen who actually did that, I think with GCF money. But then there was also a Korean bank that put money into it, IKEA Foundation, dedicated fund to energy exit. So it was not agriculture, but I think that model can be replicated also to address the ticket size issue.
Thank you. Bapon, I'll give you the opportunity. I don't know if anyone from the floor would like to weigh in on that point.
So I just like to respond to three particular points here, actually, what is quite important here. One is actually, as I said, catalytic financing. So that means we not only provide the project, we also provide a finance to build the capacity. So right now, with our readiness financing, country, NDA, can access $7 million for the 4 years. And if you look at in African context, if you go like back, a 7 million could be more than a development budget for many of the African countries. And that's a good ticket size for just for capacity building, what we are talking about of the farmer institution. Because you are talking about maybe $100,000, $200,000, $500,000. And that could be easily channelized through that kind of readiness financing. That's one window. Second window, we are talking about our minimum project ticket start with 25 million. So if you want to access that kind of financing, you have to come up with a group of consortium and with a local bank, and local bank can come up, access, or our accredited bank can actually access those kind of financing from us. But there are actually many other instruments within the GCF that we call like a SAP, which is like a short application process. If that's a low-risk project, there is a fund, climate finance now become joined together to coherence and compliance, and we have a pavilion, you may saw that one. So where we try to look at actually the incubator and accelerator, because GCF is not for the incubator. So if you have a JEF financing, adaptation financing, which is a small ticket, you can do an incubator, and if that is actually success, let's accelerate that throughout the whole country using the GCF money. So you need to find out that which money is actually suitable for your purpose, your need, and how actually you can customize and access that financing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapon. Barry, do you want to come in for 30 seconds or so?
Well, yes. The first thing is you need to develop by design something that reaches out the way. By design, you need to think about it. So when we did Acorn, we said by design, we need to be able to pay out 1 carbon ton perishable the farmer. And if you want to do that, you need by design use the last mile, right? You need to by design talk to cooperatives and farmers association. So I hope that what we have learned now also through the Rabobank Foundation is that you have, and use digitalization, use technology, is you have to think about when you start your program, even before you think about the sizes and how you're going to do it, by design, how you're going to reach out. So I just urge everybody to go back to the drawing table and make it by design so it can reach very far. And hopefully, therefore, you can use it to be very successful, because at the end, what you want is to be successful. That's what we want.
Thank you so much, Barry, and always great to be in a room with someone from FMO. Would you like to take the floor? Good friends from FMO, just for a reflection, if you may.
Yeah, thanks. You want me to go up? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Carrie Walzak from FMO, and yeah, maybe just on a plug for the DFCD. In fact, we're financing that with WWF and SNV, and that's one program that is by design, as you mentioned, there with technical assistance and with people on the ground. So the idea is that the SNV teams are there. People can find them. You reach out to them. They're going to support the deals at the bankability level so that they can be brought for financing by institutions like FMO, climate fund managers. So I would just like to say that there are things happening. We can copy them. Let's scale them. That's the idea ahead. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And we love the partnership with FMO and with WWF as well. So now it's my great pleasure, thank you, to invite up Cinero Costa Jr., who's the Scientist Alliance of Biodiversity at CIAT and CGR Hub on Sustainable Finance, to bring us all together and give some concluding remarks.
Thank you so much for having me
Welcome.
here. And I will try to summarize and give some remarks after all these great speakers here. And well, I think the good news is that food systems, all actors, people and all these stakeholders, governments are talking more and more about food systems. So I think that's good news. But I think we need to also emphasize more and more in these discussions that without food systems, no climate commitment can be met. There's no way to do that. There's no impactful climate plan that can be implemented without food systems. And food systems is one of the largest emitters, as we know, 30%. But it's receiving only, or 30% of the global emissions come from food systems, and receiving only 3% of the climate finance. So it needs to change. It needs to be at least proportional to that. And we just released a roadmap for net zero food systems last year, showing a roadmap on how food systems can go all the way to net zero emissions by 2050 with implementation of existing practices. So that's possible. We just need to a better coordination to all that. And why I'm saying about this proportional in climate finance related to food system, because it affects directly the risk-return relationship of all these investments. If we take or consider a less productive and less resilient food systems, it's low risk. It's low risk, but it's a low return venture as well. And profits may come in the long term with the appreciation of the assets, but that's not ideal. But then when you come to more productive, more resilient food systems or production systems, they are riskier, and profits are subjected to commodity prices, market prices, and it less attractive to investors and banks. So that's the whole point. And that's why climate finance is very important to provide this incentive within the food system sector to de-risk the transition. But for that, we need some tweaks. And perhaps, as the panelists were saying, single-digit interest rate, but also carbon markets, blended finance mechanisms, a value chain approach that are aspects or angles that can actually leverage more investments to food systems. And just to give you an example on pasture restoration as an example from Brazil, we just released a report last week on pasture restoration in Brazil, and for every dollar invested from climate finance on pasture restoration, it can cover at least 4% of the pasture restoration costs. So $1 in climate finance covering 4% of the climate restoration costs. So that's very attractive. And finally, my final point is that highlighting this need for a transformational change in the agriculture sector and having the climate finance as a catalyst, I really believe that discussions today can encourage the collaboration among conservation, food system industry, banks, farmers, and finance stakeholders to that goal. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Suniro. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. The room has been overflowing. Thank you to those of you who have been joining online. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you.